Aloha, welcome back to Aina Bear Farm. Today I want to talk about getting all of your resources ready to start a food forest. Or if you have a food forest going, maybe you're expanding or just improving certain areas. We are almost rounding year 2 with our project where we're converting this pasture into food forest. And we are out towards the zone 4, zone 5, farthest away from our house on about a 4-acre property. And we're looking at one of our most important resources here that you want to take into account when you start a food forest or when you're expanding, and that's mulch. All different sources of mulch. Wood chips being probably the most popular that I've seen people use when starting a food forest, and they're great. Really high carbon ratio, they break down slow, they suppress weeds, they hold in moisture. To me, wood chips are probably the most ideal, but sometimes they can be a little bit hard to get a hold of. When we had our farm right outside Washington, D.C., it was really easy to get wood chips. I had a tree cutting service that delivered them regularly, but here we live pretty far out and a little bit harder to come across them. So we use what we have, and in this case it's this guinea grass. And so as we're planting in the pasture, we just cut down the grass, pile it up around the trees, as you've probably seen in our other videos. Another thing that's important is a source of nutrients, some type of compost, some sort of fertilizer that you're going to use to charge the ground. And of course, nitrogen fixing trees are an important part of that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I always also want to talk about other sources of fertilizer that you may have at hand. Now here, we're pretty lucky. We have these fertilizer machines / lawnmowers. These are my neighbor's horses. They come and visit zone 4 and zone 5 of our pasture. Can't really let them in where the trees are already planted because they will just eat the trees too, or stomp on them. They're not the most careful of animals, although they're a little bit more elegant than cows. Horse manure is an amazing fertilizer, and they just obviously drop it all along as they're eating. We come collect it, we mix it with the guinea grass, so it's able to break down a little bit before we add that around our plants. But if you can get a hold of some type of source of fertilizer like this on a regular basis, that's really great. Another thing we're going to talk about in our video is doing things on a tight budget. We don't have the budget here to go out and spend a lot of money bringing in mulch. So for example, if I really wanted wood chips, I could pay hundreds of dollars per truck to have it delivered to me. If I really wanted compost, finished high quality compost, I could go buy bags and bags of it or have trucks come and deliver that as well. But we are trying to work with what we have, not only because in the long term it's a little more sustainable, but also because we're in a tight budget and we want to spend our money in other places. So the next thing you want to do is start thinking about getting a hold of some essential plants for your food forest that serve different functions. So here we've got a couple of different ground cover options. These work well in the tropics. You have different options in temperate forest areas, but as long as you're thinking about things that crawl along the ground, that are perennial, that spread pretty rapidly, can compete with weeds pretty well, you've got a decent ground cover. Here you've got the Cuban oregano. It's a nice thick ground cover, doubles as an herb. It's not really, you can't walk on it, so it can get in the way, and you want to make sure you put it in a place that works for you. But the fact that it doubles as an herb is quite nice, and it adds some beautiful color, these flowers, some diversity. And then next to it is a really commonly used food forest ground cover, the Perennial Peanut. And so that's what that green mat is down there with the little yellow flowers. And that's a nitrogen fixer as well. That Spreads really fast once it gets established. Can make a thick mat. You can walk on it. It's beautiful. It's just an all-around very useful plant. And the great thing about both of those is that you can spread them from cuttings. So you really just need to start with a few pieces, and if you take good care of them before not too long, you will have plenty of material to really get things going in your food forest. The next thing you want to think about is getting some seeds or some plants that will provide a lot of returns to you. And that could be in the form of cuttings, or it could be in the form of seeds. And so we've got this sun hemp plant here. And this is a nitrogen fixer as well. Let me sneak around to this side. And got these beautiful flowers. There's a few different varieties of this. I like this broadleaf variety. It gets really nice and bushy. And once it makes seed pods, looks like a lot of these are burst open already, but there we go. There's a rattler. You've got tons more seeds for your next food forest area or your expansion. You should have sun hemp as much as you want as soon as you get a few of these plants going. So thinking about those plants that will provide a lot of returns to you, really good idea. And speaking of returns, as we go up the hill, look at three other really important plants in that sense. Here's the comfrey. It's probably one of the most popular permaculture plants you use worldwide. Works in a variety of different climates. It is perennial. I know we had it in Maryland, and it would die to the ground. It's what we would call a tender perennial that would die to the ground in the winter, but then shoot right back up in the spring. And you could cut this back once it's established 6 or 7 times in a growing season and add all that mulch to your garden or around your trees and your food forest. So it's a really useful plant. It's taprooted, and once it gets going, you can dig that up and split off several different plants. So again, just get a couple of these, take good care of them, and within a year, you should have a lot of material to make more. Before you know it, you've got enough to really define your edges around your trees or in your garden. That'll help keep out the weeds, but it's another plant that really gives back in a lot of ways. Here's another one, the Mexican sunflower. This is the Tithonia diversifolia. Folia. I always get it backwards. One of those. This is not the torch flower that you see a lot of times in a seed packet in the store, like in the garden section. I made that mistake before as well. The torch flower is a beautiful tender plant that produces gorgeous orange flowers, brings in butterflies and other pollinators. This is a beast. This plant grows unbelievably fast, grows from cuttings. I've never heard of anybody actually growing it from seed. So most people do propagate this from cuttings. And you can see with this example, I cut this back just a couple weeks ago, right there. And it's already making all these shoots. Another couple weeks, it'll be double this height. In a month, it'll be 6 or 7 feet tall. It does get woody. It makes a great windscreen, produces gorgeous yellow sunflower. So lots of functions there. But primarily, to me, one of the most important ones is once you get a hold of 1 or 2 of these, you can make a lot of propagating material. So again, if you're on a budget or you're just trying to get the most bang for your buck, put your money elsewhere, this is a really useful plant. It is a warm area plant, but there are other things like this in temperate regions. You just have to think about, like, what are the things that basically grow out of control. And so I kind of hate saying this, but sometimes if you hear somebody talk about something, they say, oh, that's invasive. That should perk your ears up as a permaculturist, because a lot of times those are the most useful plants if you manage them. So this is a plant that people fear here in Hawaii, because what it does is it it will get really big, and then a branch will fall to the ground and reroot, and then it'll start to run. And next thing you know, you turn around and there's a huge pasture full of it. But that's because someone didn't manage it. You have to come in, do some pruning, just make sure you're on top of it. And when you do those things, it's a really amazing, useful plant. Next door to that is the Pigeon Pea. This one was planted this year, and they don't form their pods until the daylight hours start to get shorter. So this one probably won't form seeds and flowers and seeds until November. And it's another great one because once you get a hold of some seeds, you get some plants in the ground, by the time they make the seeds the next year, you can have thousands of seeds for these. We have these by the buckets full now, and we just kind of run around, just scatter sowing them like little Johnny Appleseed, but we are Johnny Pigeon Pea, I guess. And nitrogen fixers as well, produce biomass, shade, a little bit of windbreak, although they're kind of flimsy, but just an all-around useful plant. Again, thinking about what can I get a hold of a little bit in the beginning that's going to give me a big return later. Well, if you're in the tropics, bananas have to be on your list. Something to resource before you start a food forest. They are incredibly fast growers, produce a ton of biomass, which you can see there in the form of both living and dead leaf litter. Those stalks, the trunks, hold tons of water, so when you do cut them down, you can place that material around your plants, and it's just an incredible mulch resource. Breaks down into gorgeous soil, and you get that added benefit of the actual banana if you want it. So definitely, if you're in the tropics, you obviously have to have bananas. One of the best things about them is, again, you get one and they produce many. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 around the corner. 6 bananas that popped off of this main one that we planted, and this we've actually harvested 3 or 4 off of this one already and moved them to other spots. And so you can just pop out these, we call them keiki here in Hawaii, a lot of places call them pups, they're the little baby bananas. You just pop those out, put them in the ground elsewhere, and start a new clump. They are great when you start in a little circle area like this because you can pile up plant material in the middle and feed them. They are heavy feeders, so you have to take good care of them if you want to get the returns on them. But the additional benefit that you get is that shade that they produce. So this is one that, especially certain varieties, can get really big. I think, looks like this one in the middle might be 20 feet tall at this point. And that's been in the ground about 1.5 years. 20 feet. Just amazing. And speaking of shade, you also need to think about some fast growing trees that will give you shade. There's a lot of different trees that fit this description. This is the ice cream bean. I'm going to come around and try to get it from the other side here. There we go. The ice cream bean is really popular in tropical and subtropical climates. This is not one that will grow in your temperate forest, but plenty of versions or trees that fit this type of function in a temperate forest. So nitrogen fixer, so that's something you'd want to look for. Fast grower, obviously. I know when we were in Maryland, we had black locust that performed some of these same functions. So just thinking about what grows fast, what'll throw up some shade really quick, produce a lot of biomass, kind of take care of itself in the sense that it fixes nitrogen. So look at those legume trees. It's another thing you really want to try to get some of these in your inventory as you're starting or expanding a food forest, because shade and biomass are very important. All right, so we talked about getting some of these resources together: compost, fertilizer material. We talked about gathering plant materials in terms of things that you can get from cuttings, things that grow easily from seed. Talked about ground covers, nitrogen fixers, biomass accumulators. All those types of things are what you want to be thinking about when you're thinking about starting a food forest. And so then, where am I going to put it all? How am I going to take care of it? You've got to have some kind of nursery set up. So this is our very simple, very modest nursery setup. It is just one big table that we made here. We even used logs cut from a tree on our own site. This is ironwood, the post there. It's a nice rot resistant wood. You really want to have your plants up off the ground. That helps protect them from pests of all types. And then ideally, especially if you're in the tropics, it would be great to have some shade cloth overhead. We haven't gotten to that yet. I do intend to. Right now, we just wanted to, have something to get them up off the ground, take as best care of them as we can. And so shade cloth would basically provide you all day sun with a diminished intensity of the sun. And so that would be perfect for these young plants. In this case, what we've done is tuck the table into our guava tree here in the background. And so we're out here in the morning, the plants get a nice gentle morning sun, and then starting with the more shade loving plants in the back row, or the more young and sensitive plants, they start to get their shade towards the midday, and then no one's getting the hot blazing afternoon sun. And so you can kind of play around with your site a little bit to get around having to build fancy nurseries. If you're in a temperate area, you're probably going to need some type of greenhouse. If you check out our oldest videos when we were in Maryland, we built a pretty simple greenhouse out of mostly recycled materials. And you're going to need something like that to just protect your plants from early season cold and then late season cold. So both ends of the spectrum, and then certain plants you may need to keep them in there all winter. But let's take a look at what we've got in our nursery. We do have some fruit trees up here. There's chirimoya in the front and soursop. These are all chirimoya here, grown from seed. When it comes to fruit trees, you're probably going to want some varieties that are already grafted and several years old, so that you can get fruit a little faster. Maybe there's a really particular variety that you don't want to try to go through the trouble of grafting yourself. So planting from seed is a great option. If you end up with a specimen that isn't all that great, you can always graft onto it later. So definitely don't be afraid of growing anything from seed. We've got a few, let's see, these little seed trays back here this is Suspania sesbens. This is a fast growing nitrogen fixing tree. These are ice cream beans. We've got, let's see, a couple of those that are a little further along here from seed. The back row is all cacao. That's all planted from seed. And that's a little bit more shade loving. Those are doing well. We've got some native Hawaiian plants in here. Here's the Gliricidia. This is a fast-growing nitrogen-fixing tree that also can grow from cutting, but if you can get a hold of some seeds, they grow amazingly well from seeds. Really strong, vigorous plants. Here's some bigger ice cream beans that we started last year. Hoping to get those in the ground soon. Got some mangosteen, started from seed back here. Pomegranate started from cuttings. So all kinds of stuff. There's a little jaboticaba and an ohia down there. And then up in the front here we've got avocado and loquat. Those are just, the loquat was wild grown, the avocado just a seed in the compost. So these are grafting material. Avocados and loquats really don't produce very often high quality fruits just from seed, but we have some really great varieties of each that we can graft onto these a little later. So why not do that again? Help save some money, low budget option. Another thing you can do, and we can maybe do another video on this next time we do it, which is air layering. That's a whole thing you can check out if you're interested, where you can basically grow a plant right off of the branch of an existing tree. And that's really great because maybe your neighbor or your friend has a great variety of something that's producing really well and you love it, and they might let you just kind of borrow a branch. You just stick some soil wrapped up in plastic or foil that's nicely watered in, leave it there for a couple months, come back, find some roots, cut it off, stick it in the ground. You got yourself a whole new tree grafted off of that original one. So I hope this has been helpful. It's really fun to gather all these materials. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to find all the right things, and it definitely took me a while to research all those bits and pieces for Maryland and a temperate climate, and then to come here and learn how to figure out, what serves those functions here in the tropics. Like I said before, there's examples of plants that follow all of those functions no matter where you are, and there are ways to get a hold of lots of it for cheap, especially if you have some patience. Some of those plants can take a year before they're ready to collect the seeds or to have a decent amount of cuttings. But if you can have a little bit of patience, you can really save on your budget and go and spend that money on some high quality grafted trees, or irrigation systems, or something else that you really need in your food forest. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments, throw it in the comments section, and we will see you next time here at Ina Bear Farm. Aloha.